Hello, everyone. This is Keyword Crypto, and I'm JJ. Thanks for tuning in. This week, we talked to Matthew Graham from a company called Sino Global Capital. Sino Global Capital is an investment firm based out of Beijing. They invest in legacy markets as well as crypto. So this is our opportunity. We've never had anybody on this show who is from the finance world, so we get to ask him some pretty dumb questions and pick his brain about what he thinks of crypto and if he has any cool stories. As always, follow us, find us on Twitter at Keyword Crypto. Keywordcrypto.com is our website. You can find our Patreon information there if you'd like to support us. And with that, enjoy the show. We're still going. You're still Keyword Crypto here with Matthew Graham from Sino Capital. He's all the way out in China. Can you tell us where in China you are? Or you're just in China.
So we are based in Beijing. We do also have regional offices, and we have people on the ground in Shenzhen and Hong Kong, and also Kunming. And so there's a lot of travel. I'm nominally we're based in Beijing, and I'm based in Beijing, but I'm probably in Beijing about 20% of the time. And then this year, the rest of that time is various other places in China on the road, hanging out with Chinese investors, looking at Chinese projects, things like that. In other years, of course, there'd be a lot of international travel as well.
Gotcha.
Cool.
And how much has COVID put a complete kibosh on everything for you?
So it has not impacted our business operations for the most part, but in terms of the impact in China, on China business, on China society, A to Z, of course, it's had a very tremendous impact, especially in February and March, and to some extent April, January, February, March, I suppose. But obviously, it's still on everyone's minds. And it's clear that this will be an ongoing issue internationally, of course, we know, but also in China, where it's mostly controlled, but there are still flare-ups from time to time, such as in Beijing recently. So it's a big issue.
Is there still travel? Like, are you able to get around and take meetings and do the normal stuff you were doing?
So for currently, travel is for the most part a non-issue. However, there are these recurrent flare-ups, and when there's a flare-up, then travel to and from that city becomes an issue, for sure.
Gotcha. Well, that's good. I mean, it's good that things are still moving relatively well for you there, because things here just keep getting worse and worse and worse. So.
Yeah, man.
Wear face masks, please.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't actually get very much reliable news from China, so it's really hard to tell. I mean, I heard that there were cities near Wuhan that were like people were trying to go back to work, but they couldn't. There were new waves of the virus that were affecting, and people were upset about that. And
so there are, I would characterize them as flare-ups. I wouldn't say waves. Waves, the way that's being used for COVID, and first wave, second wave, things like that, it implies considerable numbers in strength. I would say more like there are little flare-ups. One person becomes 20, becomes 50, becomes maybe 100, and then there are draconian measures taken, and it gets kind of under control again. I would characterize it more like that.
How does it?
These little clusters.
How does it affect your business? How do you guys end up losing money? Is it that you guys have to close shop for a month, or can you guys?
So
work
it has
from home?
not. It has not affected our business because we're fully capable of going virtual, as we did in January, February, and March, where we were fully work from home. Fully virtual. So it doesn't affect us basically at all. But of course, for factories, for brick and mortar companies, for things like that, there's tremendous impact.
Yeah. So what got you what got you interested in going to China and living there full time to do fintech versus Wall Street or Shanghai or
Sure.
London?
Sure. So my previous experience was Wall Street, but I think it was number one. It was a macro bet, a long term macro bet. Number two, I think a lot of the reasons that interested me in China are similar to the reasons that I'm so interested in blockchain and crypto. It's dynamic, it's fascinating, it's has incredible energy, and it's in many ways both the present and the future. So it's really similar reasons that attract me to China and also to crypto blockchain.
Nice.
So do you live kind of an expat life? Do you know a lot of Americans or Westerners that you work with, or are you really integrated over there?
Sure. So I very actively avoided that, and I would say that. So I mean, first of all, I'm a workaholic, so I'm not really hanging out a lot. But I did very actively avoid getting trapped in an expat bubble. I think that's not good for business, and I am fairly fluent in Mandarin. So I think probably I spend most of my time with Chinese.
Cool.
Nice. So I guess like the main question.
I'm here to do business, right? Not to
yeah, exactly.
swap stories with other expats, right?
So is that it?
It takes a lot of time and energy to build the necessary relationship network with Chinese, and it's been a process over many years, and you don't accomplish that by hanging out at the American embassy or whatever, right?
You hang out on Twitter a lot instead, right?
Yeah, I do. I do. I confess that I love Twitter. I do. But that's blockchain people, and that's talking shop and talking shit, and it's fun, and
swapping stories.
Yeah. So I mean I do love Twitter. I confess.
Yeah.
But also that's something I can do while multitasking.
Yeah.
That's something I can do while I'm having beers with Chinese investors or whatever. So that is something that I enjoy. I confess.
Do you plan on staying out there the rest of your life? Like, is this like a life goal like a permanent move?
I think this is business driven. This is a business decision, and it's business driven. I think that the likely ultimate outcome will be that I'll be half U.S., half China, something like that, as the business continues to expand.
Seems pretty smart considering the way the world is evolving, to have a stronghold in China, a business stronghold. I had a like a small private label business, and all of our manufacturing was done in China. And although I don't do that anymore, I was grateful for the experience of working with Chinese people and also working, doing sales in America.
It's certainly a fascinating experience.
Was it a major culture shock for you?
Yeah, of course it was. It's the difficulty in doing business between, for example, the United States. I'm an American, right? The United States and China. It's only 5 to 10% language. Even if you had translators with you all the time and things like that, the business cultural differences are enormous. Enormous. It's very different in every way.
Yeah,
but it's not like moving to France, right?
So what was the biggest shock for you business wise when you went there?
That's a good question. I think that
or one of them, or just one of them.
Sure. To give some examples, I think the communication style can be quite different. certainly Americans are probably, and especially me, are probably at one end of the spectrum in terms of being extremely direct and aggressive and things like that. Whereas the communication style culturally in China tends to be much more subtle and less direct. You have to interpret a lot of very subtle cues. That was something that was quite unnatural for me and quite difficult for me, for sure. I mean, I grew up in Connecticut and New York, right? So especially having lived in New York City for a long time, I'm used to just being, I mean, New Yorkers stab you in the front, right?
Exactly.
Super aggressive. So that was very unnatural for me. Very unnatural.
How patient were they, or were they with you in like the early stages?
I think quite patient, but at the same time, things can go off the rails very quickly due to an inability to understand each other's motivations and an inability to communicate effectively and things like that.
Gotcha. Yeah. So with Fintech, I don't really know anything about it. So I'm not sure how much our listeners know. Can you give us like a crash course of like what you guys do and what Fintech actually is?
Well, fintech, I mean, obviously, it's the intersection of fintech, finance, and technology, right? So that can encompass a number of different things. I mean, that can include, Robinhood, right, for example. But for us, we continue to service legacy clients, but we're all in on blockchain for sure. So many aspects of blockchain are, of course, fintech related. We tend to be especially interested in those aspects because it's our wheelhouse, right? But ultimately, it's about using technology to drive financial innovation, right? And that can encompass a wide variety of things.
So what's an example of a product or service that your company offers?
Sure. So our primary focus is our liquid value blockchain fund. And so we're working on some pretty cool VC style investments that we've kind of been in stealth on for much of the year. So we likely will have some pretty big announcements in as soon as the next few weeks, actually.
So not like in the next like 2 minutes.
What's that? Not in the next 2 minutes, no. But we've been in stealth on two major projects this year, and one of them is ripening, and so we could have a pretty big announcement in the next weeks.
And those are just projects you've been working on.
You could you could characterize it as that. Yeah.
Can you tell us anything about what they are, what they do?
No, cannot.
So you have a business. So you have a business that.
So look, we have been
trying to understand what the business does.
Sure. So our legacy business is sell-side investment banking for international companies in China. That's our.
Okay, hold on. Maybe give me like a 30-second explanation of what that one sentence that you just said means.
Yeah. So sell-side investment banking means that you represent the companies that are looking to raise money or find strategic partners and investors. So our legacy business is investment banking, representing those companies that have unique needs for the China market. Strategic investment, strategic partnership.
So are you the VC, or you help connect VCs to?
So that's our legacy business, which can be best characterized as boutique investment banking. Since 2015, we have started very slowly, very gradually at first, but to make investments in the blockchain space in both the primary and secondary market. And we've been increasingly focused on blockchain as an investor, as opposed to as a banker.
So we don't know that much about investment banking, and so it sounds like you invest and you find investments for other businesses, and then you also invest in blockchain businesses yourself. Is that right?
Sure, that's correct. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And so when you invest in blockchain businesses, are you investing in businesses, or are you actually investing in tokens and coins?
We have done both. Initially, it was more the latter, but as the ecosystem has begun to mature, we're mostly focused now on the former.
Oh, okay. And then, so do you invest for clients? Do you invest for businesses and individuals, or do you do it as a business and that's the way the company makes money is return off investments?
We have both our own funds that we invest in. We have some pretty cool LPs here as in Greater China as well.
What are LPs?
Limited partners. So
Okay.
So that's how a VC fund works, right? You have the general partner who is managing the fund and usually is investing their own capital as well, typically. And then you have limited partners who are not managing, not finding, not monitoring the investors, but they are investing capital. So, for example, when with the Andreas and Horowitz.
Hold on real fast. Yeah, we lost you for about 5 seconds. Can you start over with the explanation of LP?
Sure. So, for example, if you look at Andreas and Horowitz, right? So, Andreas and Horowitz is one of the most famous VCs in Silicon Valley. And so, Andreas and Horowitz would be the GP, which is the general partner. And they contribute capital to their VC funds. And then they raise the bulk of the capital from outside investors, which are called LPs, limited partners. And so an LP for Andreas, I don't have Andreas and Horowitz, their LPs in front of me, but their LPs might be, for example, CalPERS, which is the pension fund for California. Yeah. Or their LPs might be in ultra high net worth investors. It might be Bill Gates or Paul Allen. So it's a combination of pension funds, ultra high net worth investors, a wide variety of people could be LPs, and then the VCs themselves, along with their legal entity. Those are that's the GP, right?
Okay, gotcha.
So you're in the money business.
So yes, we're in the
billions.
money business.
You're in the money business.
We're in the money business.
So
we're in the China blockchain money business.
We're usually, we don't get to often interview people who are kind of in the money business. We're like usually interviewing the technologists, the people behind the actual projects. Yeah. So this is kind of cool.
That's why we took a while to get on the same page. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we're in the I should have just. I guess I wasn't sure where we were starting from. So look, we're in the money business, and we used to be on the investment banking side, but now we are, and it was more general for fintech, but now we are focused specifically on blockchain and more on the VC side.
Nice. We're going to cut that.
Now we're on the same page.
Put that in the front.
Yeah.
Now we're on the same page. Yeah.
So all right, let's talk about some crypto.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like what kind of stuff are you, when you want to invest in something, are you looking to invest in some guy in a hut somewhere who just made something absolutely incredible, or are you looking for big companies that are investing tons of money and have, tons of employees, and like where are you actually looking for
this is a great question. And so this is a great question, and it varies a lot for different funds. So a Silicon Valley fund will usually have a very defined mandate. Their investors will expect them to be focusing on a specific stage and with specific characteristics in a very defined way. The advantage because over the years, becoming increasingly familiar with Chinese business culture and how to and how to interact with it in the best way. One of the big advantages of Chinese business culture is that we are able to have a very flexible mandate. So, in terms of stage and size, we can be super flexible, which is not typically possible for a VC fund. We do.
Gotcha.
We are very strict on China's strategic angle. So what we would want to see is that there is a way for us to contribute in building the business, not just with money, but with a focus on China, especially. And so that's something that we're very strict on. And then the second thing that we are very focused on is we are much more interested in doing a smaller number of deals, but in a deeper, bigger way, rather than doing 500 deals. We'd rather do we'd rather we'd rather go big with a small number of cool things than go small with many things.
Gotcha. Can you give us an example of somebody you are investing in already that and kind of the backstory of why you picked them?
I'd rather not comment on specific deals, but I can say that with our fintech background, one thesis that we have that we always are super interested in is that we have a thesis that the general trend for any kind of financial market is increasing complexity and abstraction over time. So we tend to look for investments that are consistent with that. So an example of that would be that at first you just have people trading Bitcoin, and then after that you have options and futures. So and those are increasingly popular. So you have increasing complexity over time. It tends to be a natural trend of any financial market. So anything that's consistent with that trend, which we have a fairly deep understanding of, we tend to be super interested in. So obviously, for example, DeFi was something that we very naturally understood.
Gotcha. Okay.
Immediately made sense to us, as opposed to some of these other things that are not as related to finance, which we tend to be more skeptical about and not as interested in.
I mean, because
so for example, that's why we passed on Filecoin. I still fundamentally don't get it.
That's interesting. We might be able to talk about that, because that's not that to us is a technology that seems very practical and
so the
necessary.
Technology itself. And again, I should emphasize that this is the opposite of our wheelhouse. So it's very possible that we just don't get it, and that's on us. Very possible. But the technology itself seems super interesting to me. What I don't understand is why anyone would want to be using this. And again, that definitely that's an example of a project that plays to our weaknesses. Very possible we just don't get it.
Yeah.
But we don't.
So this is actually the first time we've talked to somebody in like legacy traditional finance that has mentioned DeFi and like the DeFi projects. You are excited about those. You see an actual application for those in the real world. They aren't just crypto's cosplay of the financial world.
That's correct. That's our view. We think that a lot of these products will become increasingly mature over time, but we view this as quite different than the ICO boom, which didn't really make sense to us and seemed more like cosplay. With a lot of things
That's quite an endorsement, because I mean, we like the DeFi movement. Can we call it a movement at this point? It seems like
I think we can.
So sure, it's it seemed very much like the ICO movement to me. It was like, oh, another kind of kitschy idea that is going to make sense because it has to do with these legacy ideas of finance, and it's replacing that system. But that gives me some that's a very positive thing, that you would look at this and say, actually, this is the real deal. These probably will be replacing traditional finance in the future.
So we view this as a very long process, and there's going to be a tremendous need for experimentation. Many of these projects will fail for one reason or another, but we view this as something that's very, very serious.
Are there
That's correct. Yeah.
Are there any specific aspects of the financial world that you think are ready to be decentralized, like now? Or I should say they need decentralization, like if they're going to survive.
Sure. I think I would say that this is we should think of this more as a very long process, a 10-year process, rather than things are breaking right now that need fixing, and DeFi is going to solve these things. I think it's too aggressive to say that there's some aspect of traditional finance that's going to be killed by DeFi right away. I don't think that's realistic. I think that's too aggressive.
So I guess my main question is, you don't understand Filecoin, but you understand the concept of it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I get it in that bare bones way. I'm not convinced that this is something. I mean, do you think that what would be your elevator speech for Filecoin, if you don't mind my asking?
For people who want privacy, just a way to break up your data and put it in a bunch of different people's hard drives. And that way, if somebody gets your hard drive, they don't have access to it. They'd have to find the keys and then access 100 different hard drives around the world, which is near impossible.
Okay.
I think that's for people who are borderline crazy with their security, which I think only caters to like 0.1% of the planet.
Yeah, so exactly. So I'm not saying no one wants this anywhere, but I'm saying that it seems like a very, very small number of people with extreme or idiosyncratic needs. So it's tough for me to understand why this would justify raising a large amount of money and building out a whole ecosystem. If you tell me that, I don't know, Edward Snowden needs this, then and you tell me why, then I might say, okay, if you have extreme privacy needs or some kind of idiosyncratic situation, fine. That could make sense to me for sure. But if you tell me that a lot of people are going to be swapping hard drive space, and then you also tell me that you can build a token economic model around that, I don't buy it fundamentally.
Yeah, I get, but so that was the first part. So you understand the concept of it, you just don't think it's going to sell,
right?
But
exactly.
But with DeFi, none of it's decentralized. Like it's all single points of failure, as we're finding out with hack after hack after hack after hack. So I guess my question is it something you envision in the future of actually being decentralized? Because I think, so if for people who listen to our show, they'll know that one of my biggest pet peeves in the cryptocurrency space is the erroneous use of words. And decentralized finance is one of them.
Like saying DCEP is blockchain, or it's going to compete with Bitcoin, or some kind of nonsense like that. Yeah, there's a lot of weird ones, right?
I mean, but like you're saying, hey, we have decentralized finance, even though none of these things are actually decentralized, and they're all single points of failure.
I think this is a strong point, and it does get into a very philosophical discussion about the need or the value of pure decentralization or not, things like that. To me, it's more about to me, it's more about going outside traditional power structures and providing or potentially providing access to to unbanked, to having a way to access these technologies and these abilities without going through the traditional financial system, things like that. I think that's much more interesting than questions of purity of decentralization. I certainly
Gotcha.
agree that many of these terms are erroneous. There's no question that's true.
Okay. Score one for Michael.
no,
Just kidding.
no.
So,
I mean,
well,
it's true. These terms are very often used wrong, and there are single points of failure. There are many issues. This is very, very early days.
yeah,
I'm also not totally convinced that pure centralization is a necessary ideal. I think that that's an open question,
yeah,
is what I would suggest. And you can see that in a variety of ways, right? People that so this also gets into cultural things. It's really an interesting philosophical question. The percentage of whales that uh, leave most of their digital assets on centralized exchanges in China is probably much higher than it is in the West. This gets into cultural differences. This gets into all kinds of philosophical issues. Um, it
Do you think that's because they got into it later
No, I
than
don't
people in the
actually. I
West?
would have to really think about why that is, but my view is that it's not necessarily related to when people became involved with the ecosystem.
Just more
If
their
you if
relationship
you
with their
if you
with power
controlled
structures.
for if you controlled yeah if you controlled with the variables for when people got involved in the ecosystem and how much they have in digital assets and things like that, if you controlled for all these variables, I believe that what you would find is that the percentage of Chinese versus say Americans that keep the vast majority of their digital assets on centralized exchanges is much higher.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, I feel like that the reason I would think that makes sense is because I feel like the East got into it later post Mount Gox, and so that would be my natural inclination. But then when you say you don't think that's it, my second inclination would be, well, they have a different relationship with government and power structures, and whereas we're a little
Yeah.
more or less trusting in the West, especially right now. Then maybe that's another reason why, and we're just super parent. I mean, you get that. It's like we live in a country of paranoia right now. With you got to have you can't have a gun for protection. You got to have 100 guns for protection. You gotta have 17 VPNs to run this and run that, and but we've kind
Well, in
of
China, everyone's a VPN expert. Well, in crypto anyway. In crypto, or if you're a
well, that's
developer, things like that.
Really?
nice. Well,
Okay.
that's smart.
Interesting.
I shouldn't suggest that that's the average person, but if you're in blockchain, you probably have a very intimate understanding of VPNs in a very widespread way that might not necessarily be true in the West. I'm not sure. I mean, look, you get to do anything crypto related, you have to be using a VPN all the time if you're in China.
Does that mean it's illegal?
Uh, that means so you're asking about does that mean what's illegal exactly?
Well, I mean, does that mean that you said that people who are doing things in
So
related to
just look, a lot
blockchain?
of
I
these
mean,
websites are blocked, right?
I
If
see.
you
Yeah, they're blocked.
If you want to be in a Telegram group, Telegram's blocked. How are you going to get access to your information? If you want to be on Twitter, that's blocked. Many of the key
Gotcha.
websites are blocked. Etherscan was blocked for, I'm not sure if it's blocked now, but it was blocked for a time, right? So
I see.
fundamentally, you're going to need to be using a VPN all the time just to do basic tasks that are part of crypto, whether it be accessing information or what.
Do you use exchanges or you do over-the-counter buying and selling of crypto? Or both?
I'd rather not answer that question.
Right.
It's probably smart.
Yeah.
Thank you. Especially because I don't know if you saw, but there's a huge one of the top 5 crypto desks, the CEO, in the last 24 to 48 hours, it seems, talking about top 5 in China, it seems that he most likely has been detained by the Hangzhou police. It would be the equivalent of possibly like one of the Winklevoss twins being detained suddenly. So it's really big news over here.
Wait, the detained for what?
So we're not totally sure about that. We just know that he has, I'm not sure if you would want to say gone missing, but he's been taken, into custody, maybe is the best way to phrase that, by the Hangzhou police. This seems essentially to be confirmed. And so that is one of the, the big bosses in China, OTC.
I see. So buying and selling over the counter is like,
at best
cool.
a gray activity in China. We don't deal with anything with renminbi, so this is not the reason I don't like to answer questions about OTC versus exchange is more of an OPSEC issue. But and we don't do anything that even touches the gray area for many reasons. We don't do anything with renminbi, et cetera, et cetera.
I think
but it did remind me that this is, but even though it doesn't affect us personally, it did remind me that this is very much a gray area here in China, and it can be a big issue.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of listeners that just kind of assume a big company moving a lot of money is going to look to buy OTC. It's hard to imagine. I mean, then again, we see the paywalls on the exchanges, and we see all the money going through there. It's hard to imagine an institution with a lot of money going on the same websites that somebody buying $5 or $10 worth of crypto. So I think that there is this kind of idea, like how does that happen? And then of course in China, how does that happen? I'm not asking you to answer that. It's something that's kind of a mystery to a lot of people.
How much OTC happens?
So obviously, if you're going to be making a major purchase of some token, then you're going to want to be on an OTC desk, and then on the other hand, if you're implementing some kind of high frequency trading strategy or something like that, then you're going to be doing that with an API through an exchange, things like that.
Right.
So this gets into questions about short, medium, long-term positions versus trading in and out, things like that. So it gets into it becomes very related to strategy and tactics.
Right.
How much OTC is done outside of the blockchain world?
So
like in legacy.
Sure. So I think it would. I would have to have data in front of me to make a comparison about proportions, but OTC is a major portion of traditional finance as well. If you're gonna be buying 100 million USD of AT&T or whatever, you're not going to do that on Robinhood, right? So, but you might there are an OTC desk would certainly be one way that many block trades are transacted.
So I understand the concept behind it. of not wanting to move the market in any general direction
Mm-hmm.
while you're building your portfolio. But once you're done, is that when they announce it because then they want the price to go up? Once they've established their foothold, then they're like, all right,
In
announcing
traditional
it, we're
finance.
going. Yeah.
In either.
So in traditional finance, all of these things are very regulated, and I would say price manipulation is taken pretty seriously. If you accumulate more than a certain percentage of a company, then you have to make a formal announcement. There are lots of regulated procedures. And in crypto, that's very much not the case, right?
Yeah.
In general, obviously, you wouldn't want to tip your hand in advance of fully executing on a trade, just from just analyzing the motivations, right? If you're still buying, you don't want people to know that. And if you're fairly comfortable that you've sized your position to where you want to be, then you can talk about it, right? That's in terms of discussing motivations, not regulations.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean that's what I thought, but I wasn't sure if people were doing that for AT&T stock or other things like gold or this or that. But if you're saying they are doing it, I guess that makes sense because you want to. I just didn't think of OTC in terms of stocks. I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah, I mean that's for more for the pros, right? There are not a lot of people that are looking to buy large quantities of AT&T or whatever. It's not necessarily the way that you have to transact. Uh, you could also have an algorithm that breaks your $50 million order into many small orders over a period of many days. That's also something that you could do and that people do. There are different ways to do many of these things, but certainly for large block orders, OTC is a way to transact.
And is that something that you have like a headhunter and they start scouring out who may want to sell $100 million worth of AT&T?
So no, it's more like there are desks within banks, um, and at companies. It's more that there are desks that handle this sort of thing, and all day long they're talking to buyers and sellers, and they have a specialized expertise in knowing either who can immediately take the other side of a trade like that, or perhaps they can take it for their own account and then hedge it somehow. This is traditional finance is extremely specialized, and so there are people that are professionals in that business, and 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 you would go to a desk at Goldman Sachs or wherever, and they would help you accomplish this kind of trade.
So how do you do that though without tipping your hand of like a corporate takeover or something like that, or how do you feasibly do that if somebody says, hey, I want to buy 12% of AT&T, how do you go to Goldman and not have that get out and then everybody know about it in the next day or within an hour or two?
Sure. So this is a good question. I
Go
think
into a
that
closed room.
so I think that this gets answered in a couple different ways. First of all, um, if you are the kind of person that um, can buy 12% of AT&T, that's a very small number of people, right?
Yeah.
And this small number of people can drive a lot of very lucrative business. So you would want to have a long-term relationship with that kind of person, and you wouldn't want to blow it up by taking a short-term profit on one trade by taking advantage of, George Soros or whatever. That seems like it would be a really dumb decision. So if you're running an OTC desk for Goldman, I think your career would pretty much be over if you pissed off someone like George Soros by violating their trust, right? That seems like a good way to end your career immediately.
I don't mean in the sense of like violating the trust, but I'm saying how would you float out the idea to other people? Because you have to ask somebody, hey, I've got an interested buyer for 12%, even if you don't say who the buyer is. That's going to raise some questions, right? People are going to be like, "Oh shit, somebody wants to."
If you have to place it, right? So, well, I think that one of the answers there is that it's not clear to me that you would tip your hand. This is like a poker game, right? So you wouldn't say that you have 12. Let's say you take the other side of a George Soros trade for your book, and then you hedge it. And then now you have to move it though, but you're not going to tell people that you have 12%, right? You're gonna try to move it a little bit at a time in a discreet way, things like that, right?
Gotcha. So you're not looking for one buyer. You may be looking for like 100 buyers or something like that, or 5 different hedge funds.
Yeah. So you would see if you can move a little with the Bank of Omaha or whatever, and they're not going to necessarily be talking to the next guy who might be based in Geneva or whatever. You're going to see there's a little bit of a pecking order in traditional finance too, right? So you might see if you can, move a little off your books, a little here, a little there, right? A little bit of a poker game. And also, that's the specialized skill that they build up over time. Right?
So I asked it because when Buffett
it's
said,
a good question. The answer is you can't do that, right? You can't just be like,
well, no, because Buffett said, hey, I just sold, 5% of I sold like $100 billion worth of airlines. And he announced it. I'm like, well, did you just do it yesterday? I'm like, how did you do that? How do you move that much airline stocks?
Obviously, I can't speak to that specific trade, and
sure,
but this is a network of relationships that these people have, and so he's gonna have a mental map or a Rolodex of all of the bankers and the hedge fund managers and a lot of people that can do size for that industry. And he's not going to do it himself, but he's going to have a guy that does this for him, either internally or externally, or most likely both. And they're gonna have a competence in making these kinds of trades in the most discreet manner possible.
But do people get pissed off if they're like, oh yeah, I just bought this airline stock, and then Buffett announces the next day he sold 100% of his airline stocks because he thinks it's going to bomb, and you're like, oh fuck, I'm the one who bought his shitty ass airline stocks. Now I feel like an asshole.
If I was managing a hedge fund and somebody laid off Buffett's airline stock on me, and I didn't know that's what was going on, and then Buffett announces it the next day, I'm gonna call up my guy at Goldman or wherever, and I'm gonna be screaming into the phone that he rat fucked me, and there's been a lot of is throwing shit across the room, and it's not going to be a pretty scene. I'm going to move on my business to fucking where
that's interesting.
Matthew,
that's interesting though, that there's there's these games that you got to play where sometimes you're going to have to piss people off, and so I'm
going to say, I was 53% of your revenue last fucking year. You got that promotion and you rat fucked me on this Buffett deal. Are you fucking kidding me? I'm going to move all my business across the street and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Of course, absolutely.
That's when absolutely. That's where the stuff in the movies comes from.
Yeah. For sure this will happen. Yeah.
So that's
where they'll try to say, well, I got to lay off. Then they'll try to think, well, I got to lay off this Buffett. And so I can't lay it off on him because he'll kill me. He's too important to our desk. So I got to find the Omaha guy or wherever, or lay it off on the fucking,
on Soros.
You know what? Well, yeah, you got to. I mean, of course, this is like a poker game, very, very high stakes poker game.
Yeah. So how much is that? How similar is that to how the crypto stuff is going? Like stuff is going on in Beijing. Is it really similar? Is it just like
I would say that it's a more sophisticated version of the same impulses.
It's more sophisticated.
Crypto the traditional, no, the traditional version, of course.
Oh,
okay.
The traditional version is a more sophisticated version of the same games. And it's also more tightly constrained by regulations and norms. So it's less sophisticated crypto than is a less sophisticated, more crazier, more helter-skelter version, right?
And then trying to master a language and then also try to understand their poker faces. And like you said, it was harder for you to understand their subtlety when they speak. And so trying to master all that and dealing with all this money at the same time. How long do you feel like you're at a place now where you don't have to think about stuff? It's just coming second nature, or do you still?
A lot of things are second nature. Yeah.
Okay.
I would say that's probably true, but you can't get overconfident. But a lot of things are second nature. Yeah.
So how long did it take you to feel like you had your feet underneath you in Beijing
Years.
Dealing with this kind of stuff? Okay.
Years.
And how long you been out there for?
So Sino Global Capital has been since 2015. I've been in China about 8 years.
Okay. Nice.
Did you flounder at first, or were you always pretty strong?
Yeah, absolutely floundered at first. I felt like I had a good footing by the time I set up my own shop, of course. But the first, couple years in China, where I was an MD for a Chinese VC and led their overall led their international efforts, it was a lot of times I felt like I had no idea what was going on and didn't understand people's motivations and felt very lost. Yeah, for sure.
How long
did you have to? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, how long has Sino Global Capital been a thing then? Is that recent?
2015.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had 3 years of China VC experience before I opened my own shop.
How often do you have to take people to the mat to prove that you're a player? Sorry, I saw the tweet where you're like wrestling that guy in the middle of the office.
Well, I don't know. He just he showed up at my office and said, "Hey, I'm a competitive wrestler." So I said, "Well, we should wrestle."
Was everybody just like totally like freaked out by that?
I think people already know I'm eccentric by now.
Okay.
So did you win his business? Is the question.
It's a friend of a friend.
Okay.
Well, it wasn't business we're looking to win. But you can see that some of the other people in the frame didn't even look up. So obviously the team
the one guy
used to me, but
the one guy in the desk behind you is like didn't even look up from his computer at all.
Yeah, that's Dermot. That's our research head. Yeah, he didn't even blink an eye. He's been with us since the get-go, since day one. So he knows me pretty well by now.
So how big of a player do you feel you are at this point in Beijing or Sino Capital is?
It's tough.
Like, would you consider yourself like would you consider yourself like a boutique, or are you like mid scale or bigger, or like are you is that
mid scale?
Okay, nice.
With respect to blockchain specifically.
Do you enjoy the crypto aspect of it? Do you think you're helping to change the world, or is this just a thing to make money?
I'm a business person.
Okay. Got it.
I'm a very opinionated business person.
Nice.
So I very deeply admire the revolutionary type people that help to birth Bitcoin, but I don't view myself as that type of person.
Well, I guess not
Gotcha.
if you're working legacy markets too, and that's sort of an established thing for you. But I mean, then if you're getting into Ethereum DeFi projects, then you are at least partially contributing to that potential future.
Yeah,
So
sure.
you're voting with your dollars.
This is true.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it has to be a binary choice of helping unbanked people become banked and also profit off of, opening up a new market. I don't think those two have to be mutually exclusive. So, and I think that's the hard thing that it's kind of like it's one of my frustrations with people in America with government. The idea of government is they're just like, no, government's bad. And you're like, do you even know what government is? Like, government is my next door neighbor
I don't
who
have a
I
lot
voted
of
for to go represent me, and it's just like, and so the same thing like with banking. It's just like, well, no, banking is providing a service. It's not all good or not all bad. Like it's a living, breathing thing. So
I tend to not have a lot of patience for the all government is bad crowd.
yeah, it
I
gets
don't
annoying.
I don't have a lot in common with that mentality. It doesn't make sense to me. I think it's a dangerous way of thinking.
It's just lazy.
I mean,
It's just a lazy way of
seeing
thinking.
what happens to a society when you have collective action problems very vividly in 2020. I think
Yeah.
when you don't have government, then how are you going to fight a pandemic? It's not going to go well. When you don't have at this stage, it's a question of if you have incompetent government, how messy will it be? What if you didn't have any government? I'm sure it would be even messier.
Yeah, I mean, you can complain about different governments and different styles of government, but at the end of the day, we're the biggest failure on the world stage right now. And so you can have all the quote unquote freedom you want, but if you can't keep your country open because you've made so many bad decisions, then it's like, what's the point of freedom?
Yeah, I mean, Americans, as I understand it, can't even fly to Europe right now, right?
Correct. Yeah,
You can't
they
fly
just
anywhere.
announced that. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is like nuts to me,
Yeah,
and this
that
is
was
really exposing a lot of the flaws that have developed in recent decades in the United States.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast about because I'm an actor and they were saying like, oh, we'll just send we'll shoot stuff in foreign countries, and they're like, oh, we can't go to those countries because we're American. Great,
Yeah.
so now the entire studio business is limited to tiny parts of America that don't have outbreaks yet or have or aren't huge hotspots because they can't go anywhere else. It's just like everything
frankly,
starts to collapse.
I mean, you can't. These are responsible decisions by those other countries. You can't.
Absolutely.
I mean, if
I would not let America into my country any American into my country right now. It's just not safe.
If I were making that decision on behalf of, say, New Zealand, there's no way I would.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? I'm gonna. We've taken all the responsible steps to ensure against an outbreak in our country. We've got the situation under control, and I'm gonna risk that in any way by allowing people to come to our country from a place that doesn't have the situation under control. There's no way I would do that. That's why we're making that decision.
Oh, cool.
Nice, dude.
Yeah, it's cool to get the perspective of somebody who's in the kind of
sure thing
finance world.
Yeah.
It's about time actually we get somebody like that on the show.
Cool.
Yeah. It was. I felt it's kind of a spot we've been lacking in guest wise. So when I saw you and we were chatting, I was like, ooh, nice. I can try to learn something.
What do you think about this kind of like old kind of meme of, institutional money coming into the crypto space is going to change everything? I mean, being somebody who's kind of in institutional money, how do you, what's your take on that?
Sure. So I think the Paul Tudor Jones announcement, I think, was huge. We view that as a hugely positive indicator. I think people need to understand that Paul Tudor Jones is someone that, in many ways, is very low. He's a famous name on Wall Street, but he's very low profile in a lot of ways. He's not doing a lot of interviews, but this guy is like a legend. He's one of the top 5 macro traders in probably the world in the last 50 years. And this is a very big deal. Someone whose every word is viewed in extremely high regard by the most sophisticated people in finance. So to us, something like that is a hugely powerful indicator that institutional investors are taking Bitcoin very, very seriously indeed. And we view that as a part of a healthy maturation process for the industry. Things like that are hugely important to us.
Nice. And when you look at like a chart of crypto, is that kind of what you see? You're like, oh, this is where so and so probably started buying, or
no, I think it's too big a market, even with someone like PTJ to be able to pinpoint it that specifically. I think that's very, very hard to do.
A lot of crypto markets are really small, though. I mean, you're talking about this is
well,
Bitcoin,
no, I understand, but so with PTJ, the first thing is that he is a futures guy. That's his bread and butter from the very beginning of his career. So he would be placing those trades on the futures market. I suppose if you really look very hard at the data on the futures markets, you could potentially pinpoint where some of his trading activity took place with the benefit of hindsight. That could be possible. But if the question is on on a Bitcoin price chart, something like that, could you potentially identify where he came to the
just
table?
Look for the dump.
That's not possible.
Yeah, right. Well, we hear a lot of
buy
people,
the rumors, sell the news.
Yeah,
right now there's a lot of Bitcoiners talking about how Grayscale, this institutional investment firm, is buying up more Bitcoin than is being mined. Does that mean anything to you? Like, does that mean like, oh yeah, then we should be buying too?
I am more cautious about something like that than I am about Paul Tudor Jones type announcements. The Grayscale gets more complicated very quickly because it's an ETF, because there is the price premium with the spot price, because a lot of people are trying to arb that price premium, things like that. That's something that we would be much more cautious about.
Really? Okay.
Mm.
So it's not just as simple.
I mean, look, it's not
it's
not bullish, right? It's good. We want this. It's great. It's a positive sign, but I think you need to be more cautious about something like that where they're selling a box, and in the box is crypto stuff, but the price of the box isn't that close. It is has deviated significantly from the value of what's in the box, right? If you look at the spot price of Bitcoin and Ethereum, then you look at the ETF unit price is a very big difference, right? So I think you really have to be very cautious about what exactly is going on there and how very sophisticated players are interacting with that and trying to arbitrage it and things like that.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Cool. Well, I don't want to keep you too late. Well, I guess it's not late over there.
It's
getting
afternoon.
late here. It's afternoon there.
Yeah, early
Forgot you're in
afternoon.
Beijing.
Man, go have lunch.
Nice.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for talking to us. And
Absolutely, yeah.
do you,
This is fun.
your what is your Twitter handle so that our listeners can follow you if they find you interesting?
Matty Sino, MATTYSINO.
Sweet. And do you want to? I just blanked on the word. Do you want to pump out any other? What's the word? Plug. God damn, I'm tired.
Nah, I don't want to sell.
Day.
No selling. I don't want to sell.
Okay.
Don't buy Tron 4 or whatever the hell it is. That's all I got.
Okay.
No Tron 4.
All right, Matthew.
No BSVs. That's all I got.
Matthew.